Cause, a principle, aim, or movement that because of a deep commitment, one is prepared to defend or advocate. Karibu. Karibu is a Kiswahili word that means welcome. Welcome, you found yourself in a peaceful place, a place where you can grow and develop, and we hope grow and develop to your fullest potential. This is a podcast that we hope will expand your mind and raise your consciousness. Welcome to The Cause, conversations on music, history, and democracy. In many ways, hip-hop represents a particular species of social movement. The movement is made possible by new social and economic arrangements, technological innovations, and the global dissemination of U.S. popular media cultures. Sociologists broadly define social movements as collective efforts to produce social change. Any attempt to discuss hip-hop as a movement demands careful delineation because it is variously preoccupied with style, performance, opposition, leisure, consumption, representation, and entrepreneurship. S. Craig Watkins, representing hip-hop culture and the production of Black cinema. Welcome back to The Cause podcast, where each episode we take on a great cause. Today's great cause is the hip-hop movement. Moving beyond simply rap music, what happens when we reframe rap and look at it as a soundtrack for a larger social, political, and cultural arts movement? On today's episode, we grapple with questions of whether rap music is merely just a bunch of swearing over beats, or does it represent something more, something larger, something more powerful that could be harnessed to offer up some alternatives to what's going on in the world today. So it's really important now for us to grapple with the question of a hip-hop nation, a hip-hop generation, hip-hop community, moving beyond merely rap as a soundtrack. What is this larger thing called the hip-hop movement? And this is something that can be traced back to one of my earlier book publications called The Hip-Hop Movement. And so, again, it's important for us to sort of reconceptualize rap music as merely a soundtrack for a larger cultural, social, political, and artistic movement. Rap music represents the musical expression of a larger social and political movement. Buckle up and get ready for the Cause podcast episode on the hip-hop movement. This is a really important episode, for me, because I think that a lot of people, they really misunderstand rap music. Some people only focus on, a couple of forms of rap music, some of the most popular forms of rap music, and so they don't go any deeper. And if they did go deeper, they would probably wind up discovering this thing called the hip-hop movement. In fact, I argue in a lot of my work that what I'm calling the hip-hop movement is one of the best-kept secrets about rap music and hip-hop culture. So I'm really sort of interested in doing a history of a social movement, a sociology of a social movement, the politics of a social movement, obviously the music of a social movement. So when we start talking about rap music as the central soundtrack of the hip-hop movement, the question really becomes, what is the hip-hop movement? And even more than that, as a sociologist of social movements, you have to ask yourself, what is this thing called the hip hop movement? What is it moving away from? And what is it moving toward? What is it against? And what is it for? And if we cannot articulate that, if it does not have an agenda, an identifiable agenda, I don't know if we should run around calling it a movement. Up next, the hip hop movement. First section. To invoke hip hop as a movement rather than merely a generation is to conjure up and consciously conceive of hip hop as the accumulated politics and aesthetics of each and every African American movement and musical form that preceded it. To speak of hip hop as a movement also means circumventing the long-standing and, at this point, very tired tendency to privilege hip hop's aesthetics, especially rap music and videos, over hip hop's politics and social visions. Just as it would be absurd to attempt to reduce the civil rights movement to classic rhythm and blues or the Black Power movement to classic soul, it is ridiculous to reduce the hip-hop movement to rap music, especially two of the most popular forms of rap music at the present moment: commercial rap and gangster rap. It's important to emphasize here that commercial rap and gangster rap are only two of the more than 100 forms of rap music that are mouthpieces, soundtracks for the hip-hop movement. Let me give you some examples. African rap, alternative rap, avant-garde rap, British rap, chopped and screwed, Christian rap, conscious rap, country rap, crunk, dirty South rap, East Coast rap, electro rap, freestyle rap, French rap, funk rap, German rap, G-funk rap, hardcore rap, heavy metal rap, hyphy rap, jazz rap, Latin rap, mafioso rap, message rap, Miami bass rap, Midwest rap, Muslim rap, nerdcore rap, old school rap, opera rap. I said it, opera rap, party rap, political rap, pop rap, ragamuffin rap, reggaeton, rock rap, snap rap, what they call Spanish rap, Southern rap, turntablism, underground rap, and of course, West Coast rap. So this thing called rap music is even bigger than most people are willing to concede. Again, check yourself before you wreck yourself if you're running around here talking about you don't like rap music and you've only ever heard commercial rap music and gangster rap music. Please. So part of what I'm doing here is pushing back against the tendency to privilege the music of the movement over the movement. In some ways, it short circuits people's ability to actually engage the movement on its own terms. There's a tendency also to always sort of compare this thing called the hip hop movement to the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement or the women's liberation movement or even Stonewall and what they called in the late 1960s and 1970s the gay and lesbian liberation movement. But we need to push back against the tendency to always compare modern movements, post-civil rights movements, to the civil rights movement. It cannot and it should not be the model for this movement in the 21st century. And when some people do that, when they begin to privilege the civil rights movement or make it the exemplary movement, which again, in many regards, it put the premium on what it means to do and be a part of a social movement in the 21st century. However, we have to allow for alternatives. We have to open ourselves up for other ways that people can come together and fight for social justice. So it's really, really important here for us to really sort of suspend preconceived notions of what a movement is and is not if we're going to really learn some things today about the hip-hop movement. We need to be honest with ourselves and admit that a lot of the movements of the 1960s and 1970s had a lot of contradictions. That this thing called the hip hop movement inherited a lot from the 1960s and the 1970s, and those were not perfect movements during that time period. So we need to really sort of push back against that. There were a lot of contradictions and there were a lot of controversies. I'm going to repeat, there was a lot of contradictions and there was a lot of controversies when we come to the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement or the women's liberation movement or even Stonewall, right? And so it's really important for us not to straitjacket this thing called the hip hop movement by always sort of looking to the past instead of us refracting that and actually looking to the present and the future. What if we need a qualitatively different kind of movement today? And what if that movement is actually the hip hop movement, a movement that most people are not willing to acknowledge, or they collapse into the popular culture of the movement, which revolves around rap music. We got to watch out with that. Although hip hop encompasses more than rap music, Lester Spence insightfully observed in Stare in the Darkness, subtitle The Limits of Hip Hop and Black Politics, rap music is not only the most consumed aspect of hip hop, but it is arguably the easiest form to infuse with politics. No matter where we fall in the heated debates concerning the merits and the demerits of rap music, it is hard to deny that it most often represents a powerful critique of contemporary African American urban experiences. This is really, really important because, to a certain extent, in the most unprecedented manner imaginable, the hip hop movement inverts the Black popular music as an outgrowth of the Black popular movement tradition, and it starts a new tradition where Black popular movements may in fact spring from the cultural crises, alienation, political expressions, and social visions conveyed in Black popular music in particular, and Black popular culture in general. As the first Black popular movement to emerge in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power movement, the hip hop movement simultaneously builds on and breaks with the politics and social visions of the previous Black popular movements. In many ways, following in the footsteps of the militants of the Black Power movement and Black arts movement, hip hoppers emphasize the political nature of Black popular culture in general and Black popular music in particular. Consequently, those who quickly quip that invoking a hip hop movement is quite simply hogwash or rubbish should bear in mind that the hip hop generation is not the first generation of Black youth to not only note the political nature of Black popular culture, but also to earnestly attempt to use the politics and social visions embedded in Black popular culture in the interest of political activism and social organization. So again, I'm saying that this thing called the hip hop movement indeed often revolves around the most popular expression of hip hop culture, rap music, but it is not rap music. As KRS-One said, rap is something that you do. Hip hop is something that you live. So again, let's not confuse and collapse the musical expression of this thing called the hip hop movement into its soundtrack, which really, when you think about it, seems quite silly. Another point that should be made about all of this, if rap music was lightweight, if it was politically not important, if we could just so easily dismiss it then people wouldn't be jumping up and down and slapping parental advisory stickers on CDs and album covers, right? And cassette tape covers. Obviously, it does carry some weight. Obviously, it does have a significant impact on society. And if we agree with that this music has a huge extra musical impact, if we agree with that, then we have to actually sort of grapple with this point here, which I make in the book, The Hip Hop Movement, where it says, rap music and hip hop culture are merely the tools of choice utilized by the hip hop movement. And if rap music and hip hop culture can be, and truth be told, have been used to degrade and destroy, then it should also be acknowledged that they can and have been used to elevate and educate. What about us using rap music to raise consciousness? And I mean in a positive sense, to raise social consciousness, political consciousness, gender consciousness, consciousness about people's right to their sexual orientation. So when we think about something called the hip hop movement, that means we're talking about a lot of the extra musical elements of rap music and hip hop culture. When you combine them together and when you align them with a social and political agenda, that's the hip hop movement. It's that alignment piece. There has to be, and we have to identify an agenda, and that agenda can keep evolving. That's what makes it a movement. This evolving agenda. Okay, but having said that, we do need to be clear that there does seem to be a longstanding critique of hip-hoppers' confusion and their collective failure to articulate an identifiable agenda and a set of goals. Again, what are we moving away from and what are we moving toward? Most people who listen to rap music probably cannot answer that question. What are we moving away from and what are we moving toward? If in fact we say this is really a movement, those are the key questions we have to start with. We have to really be self-critical and ask ourselves, what is it that we're moving away from and what is it that we're moving toward? And again, each of us has the right to offer up some of the things that we want to move away from and some of the things we would like to move toward. We're talking about a social movement today, y'all. Hip-hop as a social and political movement.
Are you ready to dive deep into the rich histories, cultures, and arts of Africa and the African diaspora? At the Center for African and African American Studies, affectionately known as The Cause, we're leading the way in research, arts, and student engagement at the University of Colorado, Boulder. The Cause is more than just a research center. It's a space where students, faculty, artists, allies, and activists come together to explore African and African American experiences, from historical legacies to modern cultural expressions. And at the heart of it all, our students, playing a central role in everything we do. They're the future of this important cultural legacy, working side by side with faculty on groundbreaking projects and events that impact not just the campus, but the community and wider world. Research projects and events that impact not just our beloved CU campus, but the community and world at large.
Our mission? To foster academic excellence, social responsibility, and artistic expression, with programs that inspire leadership and advocacy for social justice. Whether you're interested in visual arts, music, or deepening your understanding of African American culture, The Cause is the place for you.
But we can't do it alone. The Cause relies on the generous support of our community to continue making a difference. By giving to the Center for African and African American Studies, you help us expand research, create opportunities for artists, support our students, and drive meaningful social change. And right now, Your gift will go even further. All donations will be matched by CU Boulder Chancellor Justin Swartz for up to $1 million or until May 30th, 2026. To make your impact today, visit colorado.edu/center/cause and click on Support the Cause. Every contribution, large or small, brings us closer to a future of unity, knowledge, and transformation.
So, if you're looking for a community where history, culture, and creativity converge, visit the Center for African and African American Studies at CU Boulder. Come join the cause and be a part of a movement for unity, knowledge, and social change.
Learn more and give today at colorado.edu/center/cause. We can't wait to welcome you to the cause.
The reality of the matter is that there's a lot of us who pride ourselves on being a part of the post-civil rights movement generation, the post-women's liberation movement generation, the post-Black Power movement generation, etc. We are building on a lot of the contributions of those great movements of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, but we reserve the right to remix our inheritance from those movements. I hope y'all can hear me. We reserve the right to remix what we inherited from the civil rights movement, from the women's liberation movement, from the gay and lesbian liberation movement, etc. We have the right to do that, and that's what carried our movement from the 1970s into the 21st century. This is also what has made hip-hop so long-standing. You know, people are running around talking about the 50-year anniversary of hip-hop. Well, look at its staying power. Once we linked it up to popular music and popular culture, that's a qualitatively different kind of politics, to be perfectly honest with you. And we all know that the music can be and has been infused with a lot of politics and a lot of different social visions. Here is a quote from the book that directly speaks to what I just said. This is Lester Spence. MCs, activists, pundits, and citizens alike believe that rap lyrics communicate politics. They believe that hip-hop can be used to circulate and generate a new form of political activism. And they believe that rap consumption shifts political attitudes. Rap and hip-hop are not only Black America's CNN, as Chuck D said. They are also the key to generating a new Black political movement. They are spaces in which African Americans create new meanings of Blackness and develop critiques that offer alternatives to the status quo. So now we are being very clear, at least, about the politics of the hip-hop movement and how those politics of the hip-hop movement simultaneously draw on the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, for example, but also nod toward this Blackness of the 21st century, this new African-American identity in the 21st century. I think it's really important for us to understand that the hip-hop movement is as much a political movement as it is an artistic movement. And I just want you to grapple with that. So if you think about something like a historic example, like the Black Power movement, well, you had the Black Power movement proper, and then you also had what was called the Black Arts movement. So it had an artistic wing. It's almost as if sometimes when we think about the hip-hop movement, the movement, some people act like, is an outgrowth, or at least part of its staying power revolves around rap music and the constant evolution of rap music. I would argue that many of the core principles of hip hop culture have remained the same since the late 1970s. It's just they're constantly remixed and evolve with each generation of rappers, whether we talk about, the so-called old school rappers from 1979 till about 1985, or the people who began to really sort of popularize rap music in the mid 80s going into the early 1990s, and then the explosion of political rap, or what was also called conscious rap, and then, of course, gangster rap. Because again, there's this fascination with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? So instead of sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the hip hop movement, you have sex, drugs, and rap music. Holla. I'm giving it to you today. Sex, drugs, and rap music, right? So again, it's okay to, for young folk, for people to express their teen angst in the suburbs by saying sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, what about that same impulse, the same amount of hormones bumping around in your young body in the projects, in the barrio, in the slums? So instead of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it becomes sex, drugs, and rap music. Why? Because rap becomes a kind of lingua franca. That's an Italian word for a common language. It's a way that working class and poor youth from coast to coast began to speak to each other. It's almost as if rap music is kind of like a postmodern talking drum, right? Where you can communicate information across vast distances, across the chasms even of race, of gender, of class, of sexual orientation, and religious affiliation. Rap music as an American talking drum. Rap music as part of that technology that is communicative, that allows even the least of these, even the poorest of the poor, to communicate their humanity, the beauty of their humanity, and their right to human dignity. A second major point about the hip hop movement. Rather than attempt to stubbornly recreate the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement in the 1980s, the hip hop movement began by drawing from both the frustration and futurism of funk, the hipness and sexiness of classic soul, the calculated callousness of classic black gangster films, and the skewed expressions of black pride swirling through black exploitation films. Taken together, each of these ingredients from 1960s and 1970s black popular music and black popular culture enabled early hip-hoppers to develop their own distinct style of protest music and ultimately their own unique versions of socio-political movement, which Trisha Rose, amongst others, argues constitute a series of hidden transcripts that have allowed hip-hoppers to engage in symbolic and ideological warfare with institutions and groups that symbolically, ideologically, and materially oppress African Americans. In her own words, this is Trisha Rose. She says, rap music is, in many ways, a hidden transcript. Among other things, it uses cloaked speech and disguised cultural codes to comment on and challenge aspects of current power inequalities. Not all rap transcripts directly critique all forms of domination. Nevertheless, a large and significant element in rap's discursive territory is engaged in symbolic and ideological warfare with institutions and groups that symbolically, ideologically, and materially oppress African Americans. In this way, rap music is a contemporary stage for the theater of the powerless. On this stage, rappers act out inversions of status hierarchies, tell alternative stories of contact with police and the education process, and draw portraits of contact with dominant groups in which the hidden transcript inverts/subverts the public dominant transcript, often rendering a nagging critique of various manifestations of power via jokes, stories, gestures, and song. Rap's social commentary enacts ideological insubordination. Now, I just want you to think about that. That concept of ideological insubordination that emerges from rap music and hip hop culture. Oh, this is so much more than music. When we think about the origins of rap music and hip hop culture in the 1970s and the 1980s, we are talking about a time when a lot of the working class and underclass youth, and not just black youth, but many Latinx youth, many Caribbean youth, many even white working class and underclass youth, when they felt like the dominant society would not see them, would not hear them, they developed this alternate world where they saw each other, where they acknowledged each other. And it's not perfect. You know, is it full of contradictions and controversies? Absolutely. But tell me a American social and political movement that has not been full of controversies and contradictions. Please don't blame all of that on rap music and hip hop culture. Again, we need to grapple with what hip hop has inherited from some of the previous social and political movements, but also from some of the previous popular musics, and not just black popular music. Again, I keep rattling off some of these slogans of some of these other genres, if you will, that emphasize a lot of drinking, a lot of smoking, a lot of drug doing, a lot of sex. Yeah. So please, now, there are a lot of aspects of rap music and hip hop culture. It's probably really offensive to a lot of people because it's as American as apple pie. It's as American as baseball. It's as American as a McDonald's Big Mac. Come on now. So again, sometimes people don't like it when the mirror is held up and you can see the world the way it is and not the way the people in power want it to be. See, this is that powerful concept coming out of W.E.B. Du Bois's book, The Souls of Black Folk, when he talks about second sight. This ability for people who are powerless to see the people in power as they really are. Not as the people in power want to be seen, but as they really, we can really see the underbelly, if you will, of power. And that's a lot of what you hear when you start listening to rap music and hip hop culture. Is some of it sexist? Hey, listen, America is sexist, right? So again, understand a lot of these youth are refracting a larger social issue, right? A larger political issue that's going on in this society. Is there a lot of queerphobia and transphobia in it? Often, yes. A great deal of it. But at the same time, there's this incredible tradition of Q rap where a lot of the queer rappers respond to. They challenge, they critique the queer phobia inherent in a lot of mainstream rap music and hip hop culture. Again, we have to move beyond the mainstream. You see, that's what the hip hop movement is about, offering alternatives, not simply to mainstream society, but even to mainstream rap music and hip hop culture. Ooh, we talking about the hip hop movement today, y'all. And again, even as I say all of this, the argument here is not that every rap song is somehow protest music. No, that's not what we're saying, right? But some of it is. It just depends on how we are conceiving of protest. Musical protest looks very different than political protest. I think that's something that we've established with some of the previous episodes on the hip hop movement, particularly the rap music, the soundtrack, if you will, of the hip hop movement. But this episode is more on the politics, right? On the social organization of this thing called hip hop. And again, what happens when we reconceive of it as a movement. Okay. So again, there's a point that we could talk about, rap music as a form of protest music. There's another point where we can acknowledge that obviously when we start talking about rap music and hip hop culture, this is a unique educational and informational arena. Okay, so there's a deep pedagogical dimension. If we open ourselves to it, many of us learn a lot from rap music and hip hop culture. And then lastly, this is an expression of a new form of political movement. Now, again, it's going to be popular music based and popular culture based politics and a form of music, but it's undeniable that this is a new way to develop a social movement, this thing called a hip hop movement. In the book, I write about rap music as being part of a long tradition of African American music that sort of grapples with the complexities and the contradiction of Black life in America. And so here is another excerpt from the hip hop movement. It reads, African American music, even in its earliest manifestations, for example, the spirituals and the blues, registers the complexities and contradictions of African American life and struggles in ways that few other art forms have been able to or conceivably can. Much has been made of the contradictions of hip hop culture, especially rap music, which, on the one hand, has been undeniably used to raise the hip hop generation's historical, cultural, social, and political consciousness. But, on the other hand, has been also used to big up bourgeoisism, celebrate sexism, and hail heterosexism. So you can see there are positives and negatives to this thing called the hip hop movement, particularly rap music and hip hop cultures being one of the most popular expressions of the hip hop movement. Again, rap music being the popular music of the hip hop movement and hip hop culture being the popular culture of the hip hop movement. But again, we need to connect it back to earlier, previous forms of Black popular music where, again, they are replete with complexity and contradictions, even a form like the blues, okay, even jazz. Certainly, by the time we get to rhythm and blues and rock and roll, again, lots of contradictions and there's lots of controversy embedded in these art forms. Why would anybody think that rap would be any different, right? Especially considering its emergence in the 1970s, right? Its popular explosion in the 1980s, its platinum explosion in the 1990s, and then coming into this brand new century, the 21st century. Wow. I mean, just this explosion of different genres of rap music and hip hop culture by the time we get into the 21st century, and the way that this thing called rap music becomes one of the dominant expressions for how we sort of know what young people are doing and what they are thinking. We know a lot of that by listening to rap music. To understand this thing called the hip hop movement, it's also important to understand that it is simultaneously both a Black youth movement, but also a multiracial and multicultural youth movement. As I said before, if we really go back to the roots of rap music and hip hop culture, there's a confluence of three different major cultures that congeal, that came together to create this thing called rap music and hip hop culture. Obviously, first and foremost, African American culture, right? After that, we have Caribbean culture and then Latinx culture. Those cultures coming together, that trinity of cultures, that's where we really sort of get the genesis of this thing called rap music and hip hop culture. So in a sense, because it emerges in the post-civil rights movement period, the 1950s and 1960s conceptions of race and what it meant to struggle for civil rights and racial justice, a lot of those lines are blurred or remixed. And so when we really start thinking about the hip hop movement, it's important for us to acknowledge that, yes, it's an African American youth based movement, because African Americans really, they were many of the primary folks who laid the foundation of this thing called rap music and hip hop culture. Again, always in conversation, always in dialogue with, always adapting and adopting from Caribbean culture and Latinx culture. At the same time that I would say that not only is this a African American youth movement, it's also a multiracial, multicultural, multinational, multilingual, multi-religious movement as well. So again, instead of it being either or, the hip hop movement is both and. So it can be both, have elements of misogyny, but also be anti-patriarchy and hip hop feminist. It can be both heterosexist, some elements of the movement, let's keep it real. Some elements of the movement are incredibly heterosexist, but there's a lot of other aspects of the movement where folks are incredibly queer friendly. So we've got to really sort of tease out what this thing is called the hip hop movement. And I hope throughout this episode, you're sort of seeing a framework, how we can go about reconceptualizing hip hop as being more than merely rap music. In fact, we need to understand rap as simply the soundtrack. In fact, I would argue the dominant soundtrack, because for me, neo soul or hip hop soul music is the secondary soundtrack of this thing called the hip hop movement. But again, it's really important here for us to stop privileging the artistic or the art of hip hop over the politics of hip hop. What happens when we put both of those together? And that's really the way the movement started. Folks were not privileging the music over the movement. No, they go hand in hand. And that's what makes them so unique, is that they are in constant dialogue. They're constantly feeding off of each other. This whole notion of rap music and the hip hop movement. All right, we've reached the point in the program where we have the poetic pause, where we translate some of the sentiment, some of the subject of the episode into poetry in a very hip-hop fashion. We translate this topic into a poem, spoken word. And today I have really something really special for you. It's a piece called "Which Words Have the Cure?" Which words have the cure? And I want you, as you listen, I want you to see the ways that this is in a conscious rap vein, a political rap vein, a message rap vein. Again, I'm not claiming to be rapping, but hey, you give it a listen and you tell me. You give it a listen and you tell me what it is that you're hearing here. I've got a lot of influences, a lot of poetic influences, and also a lot of rap influences here. And so I just want you to hear this lyric where it says, "Which words have the cure? How might I, as poet, speak the unspeakable of that which we have endured?" Which words have the cure? How might I, as poet, speak the unspeakable of that which we've endured? So as you hear the chorus, I want you to think of this as my ode to rap music. Or what would happen if we could get more rap music that is aimed at raising consciousness, not simply of how much money some of these folks have in their bank account. Imagine if we could use rap music to express a higher level of consciousness, not just about whatever the luxury liquor out there or the luxury couture fashion that's out there. But what about, let's talk about the environment. Let's talk about spirituality. Yes, let's use this music to grapple with some of the big questions. And so there's a sense in which some of this next piece that you're going to hear, "Which Words Have the Cure?" it's partly poetic, but it's also a bit philosophical. So I hope that you enjoy "Which Words Have the Cure?" Which words have the cure? How might I as poets speak of that which we've endured? Which words have the cure? How might I as poets speak of that which we've endured? Which Which words have the cure? How might I suppose speak of that which we've endured? Lord, which words have the cure? How might I suppose speak of that which we've endured? Which a goon or ancestors shall I invoke, in the hopes that those of us who remain might live lives of less pain, less pain, less pain? Where can I go on this earth that God has bequeathed to me, where I can see children play, free from poverty, free from misery, and in democracy? Which words am I to say this day? Where am I to travel to? What must I do to take hurt and pain away? So many of us see it, and yet we behave as though we are blind to it. So many of us feel it, and yet we grin and bear it. Deep in this space, in this place, where demons dare not trespass, I have learned to love, and now it is my compass. Come on, it guides me, it takes me where I need to be. It keeps that burning in my bosom. I swear it is the desire to be free. Which song can I sing to give meaning to our lives and the lives of our ancestors? How loud would you have me yell about what it means to have endured this hell? Which pitch, which decibel? Are you just worried about how many records we can sell? Which words have the cure? How might I as poets speak of that which we've endured? Which words have the cure? How might I as poets speak of that which we've endured? Come on! How might I suppose speak of that which we've endured? Which words have the cure? How might I suppose speak of that which we've endured? Which words have the cure? How might I suppose speak of that which we've endured? Which words have the cure? How might I suppose speak of that which we've endured? We have reached the end of this episode. I want to thank you so much for listening, for going on this journey through rap music and hip hop culture and the ways that some of us are translating it into social and political movement, into a protest movement, a movement that offers some alternatives to what is going on today. There are all different kinds of rap music out there that speak to a lot of the diversity of thought that really the hip hop movement harbors. I believe that this movement is much more complex and creative. So the movement is much more complex and creative than most people are giving it credit for. And I believe that we should study it more, the best of it. You know, we say that there's a form of rap music for everybody. So go out there and find that genre, that form of rap music that speaks to you on that deeper level. Which forms of rap music resonate with you? And how do you take that music and turn it into a kind of consciousness raising, if not political activism, right? So this is a music that can inspire more than drinking alcohol, more than smoking marijuana, more than being promiscuous in the age of AIDS. So there is so much more that can be done with rap music and hip hop culture. And I hope that you see this entire show as a love letter to the hip hop movement. A love letter to the hip hop movement. All right. I don't want to go, but I gotta go. I gotta get up out the studio. It's time for me to go do some long distance cycling, to get out there and do some long distance hiking through Rocky Mountain National Park, which is my backyard. Yeah, it's time for me to get out of here. But before I go, I want to leave you with a gift. Here is how I want to close out today. This is, for me, one of the most powerful passages from Robin D.G. Kelley's book, Freedom Dreams. And I want you to keep in mind what we have been discussing about hip-hop as a movement and the hip-hop movement. So again, a lot of people are critical. A lot of people going to tear up their face, ball up their face and everything when they see we have an episode on the hip-hop movement. But before you do all of that, before you start dissing, as the rappers say, I want you to bear something Robin D.G. Kelley shared with us in his book, Freedom Dreams. And Professor Kelley wrote, "Unfortunately, too often, our standards for evaluating social movements pivot on whether or not they succeeded in realizing their vision rather than on the merits or power of the visions themselves. By such a measure, virtually every radical movement failed because the basic power relations they sought to change remain pretty much intact. And yet, it is precisely these alternative visions and dreams that inspire new generations to continue to struggle for change." I'm talking about a hip-hop, a rap music and hip-hop culture that is committed to social transformation and self-transformation. We know rap can transform individuals, but how can we harness the power of hip-hop culture to transform the institutions that impact our lives? That's what we mean by the hip-hop movement. I would love to hear more from you all about what you believe should be on the agenda for rap music and hip-hop culture, this thing called the hip-hop movement. What are some of the things you believe should be on the agenda for the hip-hop movement? I'm closing out, but for me, the hip-hop agenda, these are some of the things that I have on my hip-hop agenda. Everybody has a right to have their own hip-hop agenda. If you're a real hip-hop head, you have to have a hip-hop agenda. Join the movement. So on my hip-hop agenda, I'm finna share it with you. I hope my students in my Introduction to Hip-Hop Studies class are listening. On my hip-hop agenda, I have major causes such as human rights, civil rights, social justice, racial justice, gender justice, economic justice, environmental justice, food justice, the arts, and I mean literary, visual, and performing arts, democracy, pacifism, activism, allyship, etc. I could go on and on, but I gotta close out the show. It's been so beautiful spending some time with you in your eardrum. Yeah, trying to give you a gift, right? We're using this podcast to raise consciousness, and I thank you for taking some time out of your day and spending it with us here in the cause, right? And being committed to the cause. Thank you so much for listening. Y'all take care of yourself, and remember, go out in the world, transform it, and don't harm it. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Cause Podcast with Dr. Reiland Rabaka. If you'd like to contact Dr. Rabaka or the Center for African and African American Studies, email cause, CAAAS, @colorado.edu. For your letters, questions, and suggestions regarding the podcast, email us, thecause@gmail.com. CAAAS. We may even read your letter on the air. The Cause podcast with Dr. Reiland Rabaka is produced and edited by John Arnold and is a production of the Center for African and African American Studies, The Cause, at the University of Colorado Boulder. For more information, visit us online at colorado.edu/center/cause. CAAAS.
Class is in session, so come and get your lesson. Ooh, the Cause podcast. I love that. Do you love that?